Thank you so much for tuning into the newest episode of the OC Network. And today we're talking about the importance of Black doulas and midwives. And in studio, we have Kristin Murphy and Edoukou here, all practicing doulas. And on the virtual end, we have Devon, who's a practicing doula, and Imani Davis, who is a lovely mother right now. Okay, so we're going to honestly hop right into with some introductions. If you guys don't mind introducing yourself, Kristin.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Kristin Murphy. I am 28 years old. I'm from West Philadelphia, currently live in Delaware. I've been a doula for about 4 years now, even though I took a little bit of a hiatus. I have an 18-month-old little son and also a 4-year-old.
Oh, my God.
Yes, and I gave birth to both of them at home. So I've had a midwife and a doula. I'm a doula myself. So, I've always been interested in birth work, and here I am.
We're going to get to, I'm sorry, my mouth is just open like, what?
Here I am.
Okay, this is going to be a very informal. Yes, like, what do you mean you had birth at home? Okay, yes, we're going to go straight on over to Edoukou. Let us know what it is.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Edoukou Aka-Ezoua. I am a full spectrum community doula. I'm an owner of a very small community doula practice called Nurture and Thrive Holistic Doula Care. And so I do birth, postpartum services, hoping to do childbirth education classes and lactation next year. So I'm really excited about that. I serve Greater Philadelphia, South Jersey, and Northeastern Pennsylvania, specifically Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. That's where I grew up in the Poconos.
Okay.
And so, I've been a doula about a year and some change now, and I've learned so much, and really grateful to be able to do this work in a city like this and get to network with other doulas and meet such great people.
Oh, my God. Yes. Oh, that was beautiful. Oh, my goodness. We're going to go to the virtual end. Devon, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Devon Kitzo-Creed. I am a birth and postpartum doula and childbirth educator, originally from the Philadelphia area. I worked as a doula in Philly, Delaware, and Jersey for about 5 years before I moved abroad. And now I run Athena Birth Services, where I do birth consulting and online childbirth education classes. And I've just been really fulfilled by this work, and was also studying in Hungary to become a midwife. Kind of in between programs right now, which is a long story we could get into later. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Imani, if you're able to chat right now, give yourself an introduction.
Yes, good evening. I'm Imani Davis. I'm a community specialist and currently a mother of 3. I have a 14-year-old, a 4-year-old, and my daughter, my youngest, just turned 1 yesterday. So that's exciting. And I'm also an aspiring doula. My work is surrounding Black maternal health and infant mortality. So I'm very interested in this work.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we have a pretty well-rounded panel here. So from the research that I did, and I think what most people think about doulas is that you guys provide emotional, physical support to the mother while she is currently pregnant. Is that correct?
Yes, part of it.
Yes. Part of it. Okay. Yes. So I guess, debunk it, or what is the difference between a doula and a midwife? Because the research I did, a midwife comes in more so after birth. Is that clear? Is that correct, I guess?
Well, no, the midwife will be there during birth. So a midwife is a medical professional. So as doulas, we're not medical professionals. We don't provide medical care in regards to clinical tasks as a midwife would. Okay. So sometimes I kind of explain it like how you have a doctor and a nurse. There are certain things that doctors are trained to do that nurses are not. And that's kind of how I look at it as a midwife and doula of certain things.
Okay.
Yeah, and then a doula is more so, I kind of is a non-clinical help person or professional person that provides emotional, physical, educational support to a birthing person. And usually it could be throughout the, full spectrum of reproductive, care. Most of my clients, I meet with them prenatally, during, the birth, after birth, and postpartum. And so it really depends on the type of care the doula is providing. But in a nutshell, they're sort of providing support, before, during, and after birth.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm just curious, what brought you guys to dueling? Is that like dueling? Being a doula? Like, is it a spiritual calling? Like, I know the history. You can find doulas in like South America, Africa, Greece. Like, did you feel like ever since you were young, I'm going to be a doula, or did it take for you yourself having children, or just a general interest in just, I guess, womanhood on the birth level?
Yeah. You want to start?
That's a long question.
I can start. Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. So my background is social work. I'm a social worker. Okay. And so I've always loved helping people. That's sort of just my jam. That's what I'm good at. But I've also loved birth and babies and just like the whole experience and the process. My mom would always joke that I'll have a lot of kids, when I get older. I don't think that's going to happen. But when I was younger, I loved babies. I loved being around them. And I loved taking care of people. And so I came across doula work when during the pandemic. I feel like everybody was kind of holed up and trying to figure out like what are they going to do, And I was watching this Netflix series called The Midwife. If you've never watched it before, it's a really great series on Netflix. It's a BBC series. And it's basically set in, I believe, like 1940s, 1950s London in a lower income, like disadvantaged neighborhood where a lot of their prenatal care and birth care was through midwives. And it was from a convent of nuns and also nurse midwives that would come and do home births at a lot of the residents of the town in their house. And so I was so fascinated by it. I was just that community model and just like this care from the nuns and the midwives and the nurses to come and take care of these the mothers that were expecting. And I was okay, how can I do this without going back to school? I was just so fascinated, right? And so I kind of did a little research and I came across being a doula. I mean, obviously there's a different level of training and certification, but and I wasn't ready to go back to school to get a degree like in midwifery or as a nurse. And so I was like, okay, maybe I could be a doula to be able to provide that similar type of care to birthing people across the full spectrum of reproductive health. And so that's sort of how it started. And then I kept, I was training and doing a lot more research. I was talking to a lot of people, and it just kind of, because I was a social worker, birth work and social work just melded so nicely together. And here I am. Okay. Yeah.
So I know for me, I've always been interested, like you said, in birth work. I don't know what it was. Since I was a child, I just loved I don't know, anything birthing, anything that had to do with birth. I just felt it was so amazing, just the woman's body and just the care that's given to her during that time. And so, yeah, when I was pregnant, I told myself that I wanted to have a home birth just from the start. I don't know what it was. And I had a doula, and she was amazing. Shout out to Talia. And from there, I just said, I want to do this for other women. I want to be that for other women.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's that for me.
Very beautiful. I'm going to turn it over to our virtual participants, Devon and Imani, if you guys have...
Yeah, of course. So I have always also been obsessed with pregnancy and childbirth. I first found out what a doula was actually when I was maybe like 6 or 7. And my aunt, my godmother, who is like, back then, she would be seen as like hippy dippy, all earth centric. She had a doula when she had my god sister, but the doula actually didn't make it to the birth because her birth was just so fast. And so this was like a running joke in my family, how my mom had to be the doula. And so I had a real interest in, what does that even mean? And then when I was in undergrad at Temple, I watched Ricky Lake's documentary, which is called The Business of Being Born. And it talks basically about the medicalization of birth, treating birthing people more as patients as opposed to guiding them through, pregnancy and childbirth the way that is naturally supposed to happen. And I just became infatuated with finding out a way that I could protect that space. And I didn't want to become a midwife in the beginning, which is ironic because that's what brought me to Europe. But I knew I wanted to be in that space similar to the other ladies. And so I decided to leave my nannying job, which I was a nanny for years, and pursue doulahood. And I haven't turned back since. And it's been really fulfilling.
Wow, such beautiful stories. Oh, I love hearing how passionate you guys sound. Imani, do you have anything you wanted to contribute?
Yes, as a mother of three, I've had the experiences of midwives with all of my children, but it was through a doctor's group, well, through a hospital. But I've enjoyed my experiences with midwives because I was able to see them, actually, some that I knew from having my son, which was 14, 15 years ago, and my daughter up until now. So with that being said, I just realized that a lot of times during pregnancy and when you deliver, you really don't end up spending a lot of time with the doctor. Midwives, I feel, have been more hands-on. And after having my daughter, the one that's 4, I realized I wanted a doula during that time, but I wasn't able to connect with one until I was about 36 weeks. And I actually had her at 37 and a half weeks. So that process was too late. But with my last daughter, who's now 1, I definitely was interested in getting a doula. I've heard great things about it. And just from my personal experience, it was great. It was wonderful to have that connection, that support, and also to have her be in the delivery room with me. I felt so much better. And through my own personal experiences, that's one of the reasons why I would love to become a doula, just to continue that cycle of helping other women, specifically Black and brown mothers, because unfortunately our voices are not being heard, and the maternal mortality rates are dire. So I definitely would like to do my part to try to reduce those.
Thank you, Imani. That's actually a great segue. If you guys can speak about what is the relationship between a doula and the doctor? Do you guys work closely together? Have you ever had any complications with that relationship? Can you speak to what that's like?
Yes, I think that the relationship is important. I think that it's even more important for the doula when you're working with the family, even before they're in the hospital. So we have to take into account that we're working with them all throughout the pregnancy, like you mentioned. So we're already building that relationship with the mother, with the father, with other people that will be of support with her. So we kind of come in all together as a team and then approach the doctor in a sense. And so I think that relationship is super important because you're already going in with a birth plan. You already know that you have people to advocate for you. You know, you're not going in alone. It's not just the mother. So I like the team effect going in. Speaking to doctors.
100%. It's very collaborative in that way. And so, because I'm very big on education and advocacy, and so teaching my clients how to advocate for themselves, and the tools and the words to say, what questions to bring to your doctor regarding your birth plan. Are there things that are on your birth plan that they may not be able to accommodate because, you know, hospitals have their policies, like what things do you need to ask and how to ask them. When it comes to, you know, the birth, I find that I try my best to be collaborative with the nurses and the doctors that come in, because there's so many nurses that come in through, and doctors too, depending on who's on call to deliver, that, you know, whenever they're in the hospital. And so I try really hard to be just like a friendly face and just be like, I'm here to help, not to be an adversary against what you're doing. Obviously, if there's something egregious going on or something that goes against my client's birth plan, I'm going to speak up and advocate. But I've learned that, and this is just from my background of being a social worker, just being collaborative is the best way to go, because I can't really help my client outside the hospital. So it's like, what do I need to do to, right? Exactly. So what do I need to do to maintain that, you know, the safe space, and work with the nurses, like helping them out with certain things, or, you know, if they or doctors asking me stuff as well, just kind of being a team player, just so that because everyone has the same goal in mind, is, you know, a healthy parent, a healthy baby, right, at the end of it all. But you know there are times when things go a little awry, and just being that space and holding space for everyone involved, because it's scary for everyone involved if things don't go to plan.
I can say that I've had positive experiences with nurses. They seem to really appreciate doulas.
Okay.
And doctors as well,
area,
but I guess I'm speaking more with nurses because we interact with them more.
Yeah.
We come in and out of the room more. But I've had positive experiences. They're happy to see you. They're happy that you're here and assisting. And I think they see, and I guess it's kind of hard to speak on because every woman is different, but I think they see the calmness of the mom in a sense. So like they appreciate you coming along like, wow, you just bring this, serenity like to this room. Like it's a great thing. And they appreciate that. So I've had nothing but good experiences with nurses.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. Yeah.
Imani or Devon, if you guys wanted to contribute to that one. Sorry, it's so weird.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have to agree. When it comes to nurses, I definitely agree. Even thinking back to my first birth and being so nervous, and my first birthing client was a very unique case as well. And the nurses were so attentive to not only my client, but also me as a new doula, and were showing me the ropes, and I really appreciated that. When it comes to doctors, in my perfect world, it's always collaborative. The reality is that, especially throughout the COVID pandemic, that was not always the case. Unfortunately, there are still doctors that do not want doulas in the room, or do not want doulas around their patients at all. I think now, with all of the research that's coming out about maternal mortality and infant mortality, that a lot of doctors are starting to be more receptive to us being there, and our clients receiving our help throughout pregnancy and birth and postpartum. But when I first started out in the practice, it definitely wasn't always a welcomed thing amongst a lot of doctors. And that's why I personally made the choice to work more with midwives and in birthing centers instead, just for that reason alone.
Okay. I'm curious if you guys have seen, I know when Serena Williams had her first child, it was a lot of conversation around the mortality rate of Black women giving birth. Have you seen an uptick in women in general, but specifically Black women saying, I want to get a midwife, a doula or a midwife? Have you seen that in your practice?
I have. I've noticed it. I just wish that even more women would come forth. So I never want it to be like a, this is just something, it's trendy. It's not a trendy thing. This is something that's absolutely needed. I say for every birthing woman, the care, the support, the education, that is important. So I never want it to be like, let me hop on the bandwagon and hop on this trend because everyone wants a doula now. No, it's so much more than that. So I would hope that more women will come forward and, really understand what was happening.
Okay.
I think
appreciate it.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it too is that at least when I was coming into this work, there's this idea that doulas are only for like upper middle class people, or there's a certain type of person that will hire a doula. And so part of a lot of what I've been doing is just like kind of just the education piece of this is what a doula does, and everyone deserves a doula. And it's not just, it's not just for, specific few of people who may be able to afford one. And I'm not saying that, doulas should be afforded their value and their worth, but there are ways to make it accessible, our care accessible and our support accessible, so that the folks that really need it the most can have a doula at their birth. And I think that's where it starts with the education, because I think there's a little bit of ignorance of what we do and how we can be helpful. Because I even heard some people say, how are you different from like just having my mom there or like my partner there? And we don't replace your support people. Just an additional person on your birth team that can help support you and advocate for you in your birth plan, and educate you throughout the pregnancy and after. So a lot of it is just trying to get people to understand that there's a doula for everyone and their support is there. It's just you have to, reach out.
Yes. You speak about making sure that the education piece. Yeah. So how do you guys market yourself? How do you get that information out there? What does your clientele usually look like? I'm just kind of curious. What does the day-to-day for you look like? And anybody can take that question. That could be remote too.
I'll let Devon. I'm kind of curious on Devon, only because she's
yeah,
how it is for in a different area.
Yeah, well, so these days I'm doing mostly virtual only because I just moved to Austria. I was in Hungary for 2 years studying midwifery there, which Hungary is going through their own birthing crisis at the time. Basically, they're in a situation where they don't have enough midwives and doctors that are there and able to help people through birth because there's a financial cap on how much midwives and doctors can get paid in Hungary. So my school unfortunately had to cut the midwifery program because it's a country where if you can speak English, you leave so that you can make more money elsewhere. So I'm still figuring out the laws here in Austria to be able to practice in person because it varies from country to country. Like, for example, in the UK, like I looked into moving to London, was actively prepping to move to London and found out you have to have already had a child to work as a doula. So you really, and I don't have any children, human children anyway. So it's really tricky, and I want to make sure, I'm not locked up abroad or anything like that for doing what I love. But it's in terms of my clients, back when I was in the States and other places, it really varies. Like the day to day for me, I was working at a birth center in Philadelphia. So that's where I got most of my clients from. Just through teaching classes, word of mouth. And I also had a lot of repeat clients. And also before I was a doula, I worked as a nanny for years. So that's where a lot of my business came from. I'm not a marketing whiz or a marketing genius as much as I wish that I could be, which kudos to the doulas that are. But just getting out there in the community, I think was the most beneficial thing for me in terms of getting clients. And there were all sorts of clients. I worked with, single parents, people that were what you would deem more like upper class, who kind of saw what I was doing as the help. And that was an issue in its own. But yeah, a wide array of different clients because everybody gives birth, all different types of people. So once I figure out the laws here in Austria, I'll be sure to tap back in with you ladies and let you know what it's like out here in terms of practicing. But in Philly, all different types of people, but working at that birth center was definitely the way that I kept myself in business.
That's a great one. Imani, I'm curious, what kind of women or parents do you interact with on the daily?
For myself, basically, as a community specialist, I interact with mainly birthing people and women of color. And in my experience, it's just been so much more helpful to have a doula. And I just wanted to go back a bit about them not being considered medical professionals, but I really wish that they were. And I really wish that doulas had more help with being compensated, mainly through insurance. But that's a whole nother conversation. But I do feel like they are needed and very helpful within our community.
Honestly, I feel like let's have that conversation now. So what are the pros and cons to not being covered by insurance for what you do?
So,
go.
So I'm also actually a New Jersey Medicaid doula provider. Okay. So I take United Healthcare, I take Horizon, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and pending credentialing with AmeriGroup as well. It's a process. My main value, like my main mission with my practice was being accessible and affordable, right? Mm-hmm. And so as a community doula, it's sort of hard because my main clientele have been lower to middle, income birthing folks. And, I still need to make money. I got to pay my bills, make sure it's sustainable. And so it's sort of like a balance of trying to figure out, okay, like, how do I make sure that I'm reaching the people who really need the support, but also making sure that I can pay my bills at the end of the day and be sustainable. And so for me, it looked like contracting with different entities that will help fund me and my services. So one of them is a maternity care coalition. So I'm a community doula with that organization in Philly. And then I'm affiliated with the community doulas of South Jersey. So I get clients from there as well. And they were the ones that are leading the charge, at least in South Jersey, to get more doulas credentialed with New Jersey Medicaid. The issue is that the process is very difficult. It's very hard. I like to think I'm a pretty educated person. And even me trying to get through these forms and just like all the things that they're asking for me for. And I was just like, are you going to ask me for like, my arm or, like what else do you guys need? Yeah, right. But because it was so important to me, I got through it. And there's the issues that you have to kind of get credentialed with the state first, like state Medicaid, and then New Jersey contracts with these managed care organizations that provide Medicaid services to New Jersey, Medicaid recipients. And so after you go through the initial process of getting credentialed with New Jersey Medicaid, then you have to get credentialed with 5 different insurance organizations. And so you can imagine each insurance has their own process, their own paperwork, all similar. And I'm like, why don't y'all just come together and just streamline it? But that'd be too easy. So like, that's why I haven't done all 5. I've done the 3. And I'm like, it's exhausting. The reimbursements can be higher. They've definitely increased it. They see the value for sure. But I definitely make more with my own private pay clients than with Medicaid clients. Okay. And so the pro of that is that I could reach more people. I mean, I've had 2 clients with Medicaid already this year that were really appreciative, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know you took insurance." I was like, "Yeah, I take insurance." But
that's great.
But if you're, I'm privileged in that I have a full-time job that's paying most of my, my bills. If you're a doula that this is your full-time job, it's a little harder because the reimbursement is not as high as if you were to, charge your own prices. And then you have to wait for the insurance company to reimburse you. And that can take a while, right? And so the con is that you're dealing with the bureaucracy of working with a health insurance organization. You're not really a medical provider, right? But you're kind of treated as one. And so it's hard because I'm like, I don't know how to submit a claim. Like I had to look on YouTube and ask some other people to help me because they weren't really, helpful. And so I think there's a lot of pros in being able to be more, because there are a lot of recipients of Medicaid that are pregnant that would like to use their insurance to pay for stuff. And I know once, I guess with Medicaid insurance companies taking, covering doula services, the hope is that private insurance companies will jump on board, and they tend to reimburse a little bit more. Because I'm also I take commercial Blue Cross Blue Shield in New Jersey as well. And so, but it's a process, and there's a lot of doulas that want to do it but just don't have the time or just the resources, or it's just not, it's not sustainable for them for their practice, right? And so I don't know, I think, and you'll hear a bunch of different sides and perspectives depending on who you talk to. And I've talked to a lot of people about it because they're interested. How do I get, credentialed like you? And I'm like, yeah, I'll tell. And now tell them the process is like,
it's too daunting.
That's me. It is, but I don't know. I think it's worth it for myself and what I'm doing. But I'm never gonna bash somebody else who's not doing it either, because you have to make the decision for yourself and your practice. Okay. I think I don't want doulas to be seen as medical providers, because we're not, right? I think because once you're seen as a medical provider, then you're bounded by the same regulations and policies and stuff that are kind of contributing to some of the stats that we're seeing when it comes to Black maternal mortality, right? And so keeping us separate from the system or allow us to kind of give us our own autonomy to work with Black birthing people the way that they need to be worked with or supported without dealing with the oversight of a government entity or whatever entity that's kind of dictating what you can and cannot do. But on the other side, you kind of have to be part of the system in order to get paid. It's like, it's like really complex. And it's case by case basis, right? And so, yeah.
That was a lot. Even I'm like, oh my God, how did anyone do this? How did anyone do this? I wanted to actually take it back to what Devon mentioned about sometimes when you're working with a client, you can be seen as an extension of the help. So everyone on this call is a Black woman. I'm curious, how do you guys navigate that field, especially since doulas, if you are a Black woman, can be associated with that kind of, or has it ever been actually associated with like a mammy figure? Is that something you ever kind of experienced in the past, maybe
with the postpartum aspect of it. I wouldn't say with like birth doulas. Maybe during postpartum, if you're helping with household chores or you're helping with like light household work, things of that nature, you might be kind of seen as that, but at the same time, we're not, and we make that known. I think, but I haven't noticed it with like birth doula.
Okay.
Yeah. Same. I would say the same. Yeah.
Devon, I know you mentioned it. Is it possible for you to speak to your experience or just give?
Yeah, of course. So this actually ties in with your last question also about, the affordability and accepting insurance. So when I was working in the States, I primarily took on postpartum clients for the simple fact that I was a full-time doula and that was like my bread and butter. But doing that really enabled me to offer my birthing services on a sliding scale based off of household income. But with that came a lot of higher profile clients that were willing to pay for my services overnight. But I always had to give that disclaimer. I am not a housekeeper. I am not a maid. I am not a butler. These are the services that I'm willing to provide, anything pertaining to the baby and, the birthing parent, but I'm not cleaning your toddler's bedroom. I'm not walking your dog. I'm not doing those things, which early on, when I first started out, I thought, oh, well, I'm getting paid. I can do all of this. And I had to sit with one of my mentors who was also a Black woman and was like, girl, you are not supposed to be doing this. You are the professional here. You have spent the time, you have spent the hours and the money and all of the studying that you've done to learn your expertise. And now it's time to craft it. So basically, she told me to value myself and value the knowledge that I have as an expert in this field, to not to give shade to anyone that does do that work, but that's not what I signed up to do. So basically establishing those boundaries with clients, early on, I do extensive intake process with clients because also in my experience, I've learned sometimes you might be working in a contract with someone and you actually don't really mesh that well with them. I think it's important to shop around because this person is going to be working with you very closely, whether it's in birth or postpartum. So sometimes that means that I've had to tell clients, hey, I actually don't think that we're the proper fit. But I can refer you to some doulas that may be willing to do this. A lot of newer doulas sometimes are willing to do those sorts of things. But I think it's all about establishing boundaries and being very clear in your communication and letting your clients know what you are willing to do and what you're not.
I agree a lot with Devon. Yeah,
I think that some people will take advantage. They will really take advantage because you're there and you're so caring as a doula and you pour so much into the family. They, it's like, oh, wait a minute now.
Right.
It's not all of this.
Right. Got to outline it in the service agreement. I agree with the whole extensive intake. I've gotten super lucky with my postpartum clients this year. But I think I was just like, this could have definitely went the other way I think I'm more of like a very vibe person. And so I feel like if I, first meeting, I can tell if I'm going to vibe with someone really quickly. And so sometimes I'm like, oh, if they weren't the best, myself saying we're at the best. I'd be in trouble right now. But like also just like doing meet and greets with them and being upfront with like what you're willing to do and not willing to do is really important to kind of keep that, because like we're postpartum doula, we're not a housekeeper, we're not a maid, there's a difference. Yeah, I think people get confused a little bit of that, of like what, because we do it overlaps sometimes, but yeah, just those boundaries are really important.
If you guys don't mind clarifying the terminology, what does postpartum mean for the folks who don't know?
So postpartum is following the birth.
Okay.
So in plain, in the simplest form, following birth. So, yeah.
And you'll see sometimes some folks they'll say it's like the 12 weeks after birth, fourth trimester. Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes it's definitely a lot longer than 12 weeks.
Yes, right.
But typically that's sort of like they kind of consider the fourth trimester like the 12 weeks after birth. Yeah.
Okay.
That's postpartum. Yeah.
Perfect. I'm curious, what are I guess tell us, what was your first doula experience like? If you don't mind talking about your first client, you don't got to give a name or anything, but what was that like for you?
So as a doula, my first client, I was nervous. I guess as expected. You're in such an intimate setting with this person. And for my first client, I did not have the luxury of having her throughout her whole entire pregnancy or being her doula throughout the whole entire pregnancy. Probably got to her maybe 30 weeks. And I love to introduce myself and build a bond and build that relationship with the mother and the family much earlier than 30 weeks. But that was the case. And so, but her birth was beautiful. She really appreciated my presence and the things that I was able to teach her and her fiance in that time period that I had them. And it was beautiful. Okay. I loved it.
Yeah. My first doula client, birth doula client, was my big sister. So if she's watching, she was my big sister, and I was so nervous because she was my sister, and I was still going through my training and my modules, whatever. And so, but she was giving birth. She was like my first client, and it was nerve-wracking because things didn't go as planned. She was supposed to give birth at the birth center, but like her water broke prematurely, and typically sometimes birthing centers or hospitals will give you you get put on a time clock essentially, because when your water breaks before and there's no contractions or labor is not progressing, you increase your chance of getting an infection and other problems that happen. And so, and she was right around her due date too. But, the birth center that she was giving birth at had a policy that after 12 hours, if there were no significant changes, she would have to be transferred over to the hospital across the street. And so, so it was nerve-wracking because I was just like, listen, this is not the way that I read it in my book.
This is not on my birth plan.
This is not right. It's not on the birth plan. It's not in my modules. Like, how do I do this? But I kind of just had to rely on my expertise and just her being her sister and just holding space for her and her husband at the time, and being there and just doing whatever I could do to help her cope through to changes, changing the birth plan, transferring over to the hospital. And luckily the providers that were helping were really nice and informed us of everything, explained everything, and was really receptive to our questions and stuff. So I think that also really helped with some of the nerves of just I heard about doctors are really bad and I don't know I was just because it was so new, and I was taking in so much information during my training and through Instagram, and so everything was just coming together, and I didn't know how to navigate that, but I had to trust myself, and I had to use my social work skills. I'm like, it's not about you, Edoukou. You have to be there for your sister, and so everything went really well. She gave birth to my beautiful nephew, and it was such a life-changing experience because I was like, oh, okay, so when do we do it again? What's the next one? But then I was thinking, but I had to learn as a doula that you're not responsible for somebody's birth outcome, right? Yes. And you could do all the education in the world, you can prep them, have the whole thing, everything. But birth, is unpredictable. Things happen. And I had to learn through that. And I'm glad that was my first experience. My first experience was one that wasn't like, ended the traditional way or like didn't go the way that my book said they would. And learning that, things go off the rails sometimes. Like, how are you going to support someone when things don't go to plan? And how do you coach someone through that? And how do you support them through that? And so I'm really lucky that was my first, experience, because it made me a better doula. To support other people, but it was nerve-wracking, I'm not gonna lie. I was like, oh my god. Also personal connection too, because it was my sister. So
that was a special one.
I'm gonna transition over to Devon and Imani.
So my first birth was really, really challenging. I was contacted by a 19-year-old young lady who had found out she was pregnant a couple weeks after her boyfriend was murdered. And she didn't have a really good relationship with her mother and her sisters. It was very manipulative and verbally abusive and not conducive to a safe birthing environment. So I was honestly even questioning if it was the right client for me to take. But after meeting her and spending time with her, I really, really knew that I was supposed to be there and I was supposed to help her. Now, because of the situation, I did things differently than I would have done with another client who maybe had a support person at home. Like, I went very, very early in the labor, was there for several hours, and also had to deal with, her family coming to the hospital when she was explicit that she didn't want them in the birthing space. So that put me in somewhat of a rough position, but luckily I had the nurses there that were really, really helpful. I went and explained, hey, I'm her doula. This is my first birth. I'm really nervous. And we also have this really unique situation. But luckily the nurses there were amazing. And this young lady was just so sweet and so grateful throughout the whole process. And, we had worked on exercises for her to be centered and grounded and not worry about what was going on, even outside of her hospital room, because it got to be really dramatic and volatile for a portion of her birth. And I had to even center myself and realize why I'm doing this work. I'm here to, protect this space, keep it sacred for her, and to support her. So while it was really challenging, I'm really, really grateful that I had that experience with her because, number one, I was honored that, she was in such a vulnerable time that she trusted me to be that person that was there with her because she literally had nobody else. But also it taught me how to deal with different challenges and different cases because, when I was doing my training, just out of my own, I don't even know what to call it, but I was just kind of envisioning every birth would be, to a perfect little 2-parent household, and it would be all butterflies and roses because I was just excited to get out there in the world and to help. But the reality is that's not what everybody's dynamic is going to be. So it really humbled me and really prepared me for other challenges, that have come up throughout the years. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. I came out stronger as a doula and as a person. And she gave birth to a healthy baby boy who is now thriving, and he's like going to kindergarten or one of those first grade or something like that. So it was really challenging, but I learned a lot. And that's what this this business is about or this practice is about, because birth is something that there's no two are identical. And it's always going to be evolving and changing. We're always going to have new research surfacing. We're always going to have different situations. So it's important to stay on your toes. And I learned that right off the bat. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
For sure.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yeah.
To us. As doulas, did you guys cry at the first birth?
Oh my God.
Well, it's my nephew. So I was
For you.
Yes.
Devon, did you cry?
Yes, I was a wreck. I cried while the baby was, being pushed out. I cried the whole drive home. I was a mess.
The drive home is something.
It's very emotional.
Yeah.
It is. In the most positive way. It's very emotional.
It is.
Yeah.
You're going through all these
I thought it
emotions.
was just me.
No, especially if you've been up for hours with somebody, and you're going home and you're delirious and you're just like on cloud 9 at the same time. It's wild.
Yes.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, the amount of times I've had to pull over on 476 or 95. I just need a minute, you just hear that one song and then the tears just start flowing. So the drive home is always very emotional.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cathartic.
Not just me.
Yeah,
not just
okay.
you.
Not just you.
Yeah, I imagine. I'm going to switch over to Imani. We haven't heard from you. Just checking in.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to speak to the last question from the parenting perspective. Just like a quick backstory, and like Devin said, all births are different. So with my first child, I had a great experience. He came really fast. I just, I was able to push him out, and he was put right on my chest, and everything was great. But I didn't have another child for another 10 years. And with my daughter, I didn't have such a good experience. And I'll just make it quick. They often tell women, oh, you have to lie on your back. And I knew from having my son, that's not the case. You don't have to have a baby in any specific position. It's what makes you feel most comfortable. So literally in labor, in the delivery room, I'm telling the nurse, I'm like, listen, I want to be on my side. I don't want to be on my back. And she had the nerve to tell me, well, then you can hold your own legs. And from that being in my mind, I knew I was like, I need a doula. So that's why I was so adamant with my last delivery to have someone there to help me advocate. I mean, I had her father there, but he was in shock. And a lot of times I think people don't realize their partner might not be the best support during birth. But either way, I can say honestly, having a doula from my second birth to my last was a completely different experience, because I just felt more safe. I felt more secure. I knew that I had someone there to help me advocate. Could I not advocate for myself? And with my last experience, my partner wasn't involved. So I had her there. She was able to come to my house, take me to the hospital, be there with me, hold my hand. So just having all of those things was so much more of a welcoming experience, as opposed to have to do it alone, or, in the last experience, have to advocate for myself or go back and forth with nurses. I would just say that I felt a whole lot more secure. And it was just great to have someone there to hold my hand, literally, and to know, it's going to be okay and you're going to get through this. And, to let me know what was coming, because my water didn't break. So they had to break my water. And, nurses are not normally going to stop and tell you each step. They're just going to do what they have to do to get the baby out. And I was just really thankful that she was able to tell me, each step of what was going. Okay, the baby's crowning, letting me know. And I was just so happy with having her there with me. And we still keep in touch now. But yeah, it was just a great experience. So I advocate. That's why one of the reasons why I am an aspiring doula now, because I'm like, yo, this is needed. And especially in the postpartum care period, I feel like also because after that 6-week period, it's like you're just dropped off the map. It's like, okay, come in for your 6-week checkup. And after that, you're forgotten about. And it's unfortunate. And also in some of the work that I do, we do early warning signs training, so people don't realize that postpartum period lasts all the way up into a year plus. So you could be going through things that you're not aware of, and, not knowing what to say. And hopefully your doula can say, hey, I noticed, you're not looking too good, or your blood pressure is a little high. But just having that extra support there to get you to check on yourself is really important too.
Thank you so much for sharing that story and for just bringing up postpartum. I'm honestly just intrigued by that. We hear a lot about postpartum depression, but if you guys can just speak to what are the expectations for postpartum? What do you see out in the field that women are experiencing? Any helpful tips for women? I don't have any children. I'm just every time you guys talk, I'm like, what the hell? Oh my God. So please give us some insight on that postpartum, and what have you experienced yourself as mothers or as caregivers?
Postpartum?
Yeah.
More of a birth doula, even though I do postpartum.
Postpartum is so interesting. I think it's such a sacred time, but the way that our society is set up doesn't allow for parents to take that time they need to rest and heal and bond with their children. And I've been doing a lot more postpartum care the last few months, and it's just really interesting to see how it plays out differently for everyone involved. And, it used to be that you had a village of people that came around and supported your household and were able to kind of take care of you, the birthing parent, so you could take care of your child. But, what do you do? I think another friend of mine who's also a doula was because we were teaching a class together, and one of the things she says, what do you do when the village is working? When the village is working, they can't take time off. Maybe you have, your parents, your mom or aunt or somebody can come in for a week or two, but then, what do you do, right? And so that's sort of where postpartum doulas come in to kind of help and do whatever is supportive for the household, so that the family can thrive and move forward, especially in a sacred time like postpartum. And it really depends on, I've worked with single moms, I've worked with two-parent households, and, the needs are so different. I've worked with two-parent households where they didn't have that village, and I worked with single mom who had a village, right? And so the main thing that I keep coming back to in those experiences is that, when you don't have paid leave, right? Or you can only take off this much PTO, or if you don't come back to work, you won't be able to pay your, it's just that fear of how am I going to take care of my family and take care of myself when, our system isn't set up to help parents that, or birthing folks who just give birth and you only have 6 weeks unpaid, I think it's called. And if you just have to be lucky that you work with a organization or a company that will allow you more time, or some people bank up their PTO. Luckily I work at a school, and we have at least short-term disability, so you can get paid while you're out on leave, and it's not your full salary, but it's something. But I learned that not all employers offer that, right? And so what do you do if you have family that live across the country or can't come, or they're also working? It's your first time with take care of a baby. So that's why I'm so honored when people ask me to help them, because it's such a sacred time for everyone involved. And the little help that I can do, or something I can contribute to the household, means a lot, given just how bad the problem is, in our society. So yeah, I don't know if anyone else has from your perspective of a mom, I'm really curious to see how you've managed, and others too.
Yeah, so I did have a postpartum doula with my second pregnancy. He is 18 months now. And that was amazing. Shout out to Janelle. That was an amazing experience. It was so much that I learned, and I didn't know how to care for my body postpartumly. I just, it's just the baby's here now, just care for the baby. But there's so much more that you have to do for yourself, because you cannot give into others, especially a baby that's depending on you for everything. I was nursing. It's just, they're depending on you for every single thing. you cannot give that to them if you don't pour into yourself and you take care of your own body. So I love my postpartum experience. I know that I needed it. I wish I had it my first go round, my 4-year-old, but it was amazing. And I would definitely recommend postpartum care to women, without a doubt.
Okay. Transitioning remotely.
I'm sorry. If I can, so I mentioned before how postpartum work was like my bread and butter, but it's also something I'm so passionate about. I feel like I could talk about it for days. So that's actually like how I started my doula practice, was doing postpartum care while I was still nannying. And I did a lot of research, and I've done a lot of different workshops and classes on different postpartum traditions around the world, and also became a member of the Traditional Birth Workers Association, which is a worldwide collective of doulas that specialize in postpartum care. And so we do these yearly workshops where we have people come and speak from all over the world on the different traditions that they have in their cultures. So, in China, they have something called sitting the month, which is like the 30 or 40 days after someone gives birth. In India, they have something, I think it's called like the Sutika, which is the same period. They have it in Morocco. In Latin America, they have La Cuarentina, which is the 40 days. And basically, what the common theme is through all of these cultures around the world is for 40 days after someone gives birth, they are seen as having one foot in the grave. It's such a delicate time to be living, because you're essentially between realms. You just brought life into this earth, but it's also something that can be very dangerous. And so many cultures around the world believe that a birthing person is supposed to be cared for and watched after and protected and fed and bathed. And their only job is to feed the baby. And so we see in many of these cultures where where people are given a lot more time off of work, first of all, so that they can stay home and rest their bodies and take care of themselves and nourish themselves and, make sure that they are staying healthy and that the baby is healthy. You have many people from your family and from your community that are coming in to sit with the birthing person throughout the day to make sure that they are fed and never lonely. And I'm sure we all, especially as birth workers, see a need for that in the United States. And so I did everything in my power in my personal practice in the States to bring part of that tradition to my clients. Obviously, I can't be with them, for, 365 days for the day, the time after the baby is born. Can't be with them around the clock, but the time that I am with them, I'm making sure that they know that they are valued, they are appreciated, making sure that they do stay healthy. I think it's really important as a postpartum doula to do your research and get your education to know, what things could come up, what are the different signs of, things like postpartum hemorrhaging or hypertension, those sorts of things. It's really important to keep watch. Yeah, the nutrition, all of those things, as well as, watching after the baby to make sure that they are healthy and they are safe as well. So I'm really saddened to see that the way that the Western world doesn't appreciate a birthing person, and, see them as a miracle, because, birth is a miracle. But I do think that we're on the right track with so many doulas facilitating and guarding that space. And, many doulas will tell you it extends past the first 12 weeks. In my personal practice, I think it's at least the first year, because no 2 months, after you have a baby are going to be the same. It's really important to protect that space. There's a saying that midwives are guardians of normalcy, but I think that postpartum doulas are also guardians of normalcy, and that doesn't end the moment that the baby is born. In fact, it just begins.
Thank you, Devon, so much for that. We're actually coming up on our 2-minute mark, but I wanted to give you ladies time to ask questions to each other. If you have any questions you wanted to pose to the panel.
Well, you touched a little bit on it. It was something that I wanted to get involved in. Right now, I am private pay, just in my practice, but I guess I'll link up with you after to talk a little bit more about that. But I found it so interesting because I would like to accept insurance. I would like to help more mothers, and I know that's the way to do so. So, that's a question coming for you.
We will be exchanging information for sure. If anything, I would say do a shameless plug for your businesses. Please shout yourself out, highlight yourself. I'll be sure to add all that post as well. But I have a question really quickly. Is there a National Doula Day, a holiday for you guys?
There's World Doula Week or something like that.
Oh, okay, a week.
Or there was, I can't remember. Yeah, it was sometime in March, I believe, because I made a post about it. But I can't remember if it's a week or if it's a day. Okay. World Doula Day or World Doula Week. I can't remember.
We'll be sure to highlight that. Right. I just want to go around the table one more time. Just shout out your businesses and thank you, ladies, so much for coming out today. I'm in awe. I'm just literally in awe. What? We'll start with Kristin, then we'll end with Imani.
Yep. So Kristin Murphy, I'm the owner of A Mother's Empowerment Doula Services. You can find me on Instagram at Kristin_your-doula. So, hey.
Perfect.
All right. My name is Edoukou Aka-Ezoua. I'm a certified full spectrum community doula, owner of a Nurture and Thrive Holistic Doula Care. You can find me on Instagram, Nurture Thrive Doula, or my website, www.nurturethrivedoula.com. I do birth, postpartum, hopeful that I'll be doing community childbirth education classes and lactation services next year. So,
perfect. Right on over to Devon.
So my name is Devon Kitzo-Creed. You can find me online, all socials at Devon_DKC. You can also check out all of my services as birth and postpartum doula, childbirth educator, and birth consultant at www.athenabirthservices.com.
And Imani, you can close us out.
Okay, ladies, I'm Imani Davis. You can find me on Instagram at _Miss_GP. And also I have, the Blue Lotus Boutique, where I create spiritual baths and herbal steams and blends for women in postpartum. So thank you, ladies, so much. And I just want to personally say thank you for all of the work that you do, because it is needed and necessary, and you are all valued and appreciated.
Yes, thank
this
you.
Has been, you guys, oh my goodness, I'm going to cry. Is this the emotion you're talking about? It's been so beautiful. Thank you so much for tuning into this new episode. Yes. And thank you for all, I can't thank you enough. Oh my God.
Yeah. Thank you for setting the space for us to just talk.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for reaching out.
Connecting us. I don't know, Virgin Marys or something. It's very thorough. Oh my God. Thank you so much. And we'll tune into the next episode. Peace.